God.
I'm thinking, bullshit. So we get the right amount of coverage for liability. Then it moves into uninsured, underinsured, and it says, do you want uninsured, underinsured? We recommend no. It's unbelievable. And I'm not saying it's that way in every case, but this was a major insurance company that sells policies nationwide, and this is what they're prompting people in their online forms. But the insurance company's out there for themselves.
Do you know if your insurance is paying you fairly? Let's find out. Welcome to The Rebellion. I'm your host, Ginger, here with the founding member of the Biker Lawyers, Pete Lee. Pete, you've been a lawyer for, almost 4 decades now, is it?
Yep, coming up on 38 years if you want to be precise about it.
You've been in personal injury for most of that time, if not all of it, right?
All of it in varying degrees.
And in all that time, would you say that insurance companies pay out fairly, or do you think that not so much?
Fairly rhymes with rarely.
Truly. What can you do when you've been injured? The other side's insurance just isn't going to pay you out, only offers to pay you a small amount. Do you settle for the scraps? What do you do?
You basically have 2 choices. Choice number 1 is tuck your tail between the legs, take the crumbs, and walk away from it. Choice number 2 is hire a lawyer and go to battle with them.
We've talked about this before, but I think it bears repeating. How does insurance factor into these cases? Are you able to sue them directly? And if not, how do they play in these cases?
In almost every case, you can't name the insurance company directly. So most cases that go to trial, it might be against John Brown, but behind John Brown stands the insurance company.
Sure.
You just can't name them. You can't talk about insurance at the trial. So the jury, basically what the jury hears is the case is against John Brown, except in extremely rare circumstances.
So we've not really covered this, but you do get to name insurance companies if they're underinsured or uninsured carriers for your policy, correct?
Correct. That's the exception. So the 2 scenarios, one of them is John Brown has $20,000 of insurance, but you've got maybe, let's just say $500,000 in medical bills. So John Brown's $20,000 isn't enough, and hopefully you've got a good underinsured motorist policy. And in that case, you get to directly name your own insurance company in the lawsuit. Same thing with an uninsured. Maybe John Brown that caused the crash doesn't have any insurance at all, which is true for 1 out of 10 drivers, believe it or not. But if somebody has no insurance at all, then it's just a direct action against your own insurance company for uninsured motorist benefits.
And that's only if you manage to buy that policy ahead of time.
Exactly.
And that's a policy that insurance companies don't often sell you. They don't often even mention, from what I understand. At least from personal experience, I don't think I ever had an insurance agent tell me you need underinsured or uninsured motorist coverage.
Let me put it this way. I just helped walk through somebody that was buying insurance online recently. And the first thing it asks is, how much coverage do you want? And it says, we recommend $20,000.
Oh, God.
I'm thinking, bullshit. So we get the right amount of coverage for liability. Then it moves into uninsured, underinsured, and it says, do you want uninsured, underinsured? We recommend no. It's unbelievable. And I'm not saying it's that way in every case, but this was a major insurance company that sells policies nationwide, and this is what they're prompting people in their online forms.
And to clarify here, if you don't have underinsured, uninsured motorist coverage, how does that open you up to not being able to recover in the case of, let's say you get into a serious collision, you've got $100,000 in medical bills, you've had major surgeries, the person on the other end, let's say they have 20/40 limits, $20,000 to $40,000 per incident, right? And that's the state minimum in Iowa, if I remember correctly.
Correct. And so $20,000 per person is what that is, $40,000 per crash. So for example, if you got a passenger, there's going to be up to $20,000 for each of you and a max of $40,000 for the whole crash, which in the scenario you just described, which is really quite common, you're screwed unless you have underinsured motorist coverage.
So how does that come into play in this instance? Let's say, you get into this scenario and it's 20,000 is what you can get. It's, you're by yourself, there's no other passenger. So it's just you, major surgeries, 20,000's on the table, and the insurance company is coughing it up, policy limits immediately. Where does UIM now factor in?
So to properly bring an underinsured motorist claim, there are some legal hoops that have to be jumped through, and those hoops are defined in your insurance policy. The typical situation is you can't just take that $20,000 and call it good and then sue your own insurance company for underinsured motorist benefits. You have to show them that the person, John Brown, that hit you, that has $20,000 in coverage, you have to show them that that's all you realistically can get from him. So for example, the $20,000 insurance coverage, yeah, that's the most you're going to get from insurance. But now we got to make sure that John Brown doesn't have assets that might be able to cover a trial verdict, because if he does and you take the $20,000 without consulting with your own insurance company and showing them John Brown's assets, you're going to get shut out on your underinsured motorist benefits as well.
So let's talk a little bit more about the assets, because I know it's a common misconception that when we are suing somebody that we're going after their personal assets and not the insurance policy necessarily. And that's definitely the way that I feel like the trials have been structured to make the jury believe that, because you're not allowed to talk about the insurance company typically in trial, from what I understand.
Correct.
So are we going after assets? At what point do you go after assets?
It's extremely rare that you have a case where it makes sense to try to go after the assets of John Brown, because typically, let's just go back to the John has bought a minimum insurance policy of $20,000 per person. That's a pretty good indication that John Brown doesn't have a lot of assets to protect. Because if he does, he's going to be thinking about it, you'd like to think, and my experiences show me this to be almost 100% of the time true. If John Brown has assets to protect, he's going to have a bigger policy than $20,000. So almost always, when you've got somebody with a $20,000 policy, and the way that you prove that they don't have additional assets that can be satisfied for a judgment is you require them to fill out a financial statement to disclose all of their assets and income as well as liabilities, and then you show that to your insurance company. And I mean, we're literally talking hundreds, if not thousands of cases that I've seen over the years that I've been doing this. It almost never happens that somebody who has significant assets doesn't have a big insurance policy.
So as a general rule, if you've got wealth, you're going to protect it. Insurance policies tend to be able to do that nicely as long as you have the money to do so. So the only scenario really where a personal injury attorney is advocating let's go after assets is where there is substantial assets on the other side, but they for some reason decided not to protect it with a proper insurance policy.
Again, that's super rare, because people who have substantial assets typically are smart enough to know that if they get into a situation where they cause a serious injury to somebody, their assets are at risk. So they almost always are going to have a substantial insurance policy to protect those assets. However, in the extremely rare case where somebody doesn't have enough insurance to protect themselves in the case of a serious crash, you can go after their assets if they have things that they can't protect in bankruptcy.
And to clarify some of the things that get protected in bankruptcy, I believe there's a homestead exemption.
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. Some of it is really logical. Some of it doesn't make a lot of sense. But the bottom line is there are things that are protected in bankruptcy, including your house, a vehicle, tools of the trade. A big one is retirement accounts.
Sure.
You can't put your hands on those. So
sure.
What you're looking for is a situation where somebody has assets that they cannot protect in bankruptcy that you can legitimately go after. And again, as I sit here right now, I can think of one case I've seen like that in 38 years.
Okay. And to clarify some of those exemptions, in case the viewers are wondering, I believe it includes a musket.
That's why I said some of them are kind of goofy.
But I remember a few weird ones being in there and laughing pretty heavily at how outdated some of the terminology was. If you need to protect your assets, you can buy a very nice musket.
Exactly.
So I think it's worth clarifying. Practically speaking, we're not really going after defendants after a crash. We're just going after insurance policies.
That's almost 100% true.
Okay. And does the defendant get to choose their own attorney to defend their insurance policy?
The typical answer is no.
So how do they get an attorney?
When John Brown gets sued,
Sure.
John Brown contacts his insurance company. His insurance company has a list of insurance defense lawyers that they use when their policyholders get sued. They pick the lawyer to defend John Brown and really themselves.
And does the defendant have to pay for this attorney?
I've never seen a policy where somebody that gets sued in a crash has to pay for the lawyer. It's the insurance company that's footing the bill.
Which I suppose in a way you've paid for it already because you've been paying on that insurance policy for however long it's been in effect.
Yeah, it's in essence a prepaid insurance policy to cover the cost of a lawyer if you end up getting sued for crashing into somebody.
So are there downsides as a defendant? Let's say, you're negligent, you're on your phone, and you accidentally hit somebody. And so the insurance company, they send you an attorney to defend you ostensibly, but more importantly, it seems like they're defending their insurance policy a little bit more heavily. Are there any downsides for John Brown as a defendant in the scenario to not being able to choose their attorney and having that scenario?
Well, you hit the nail on the head there. The insurance company's obligation is to defend the case, but really what they're doing is defending up to their policy limits. So if it's a case that has the amount of damages are larger than the policy limits, then John Brown really doesn't have protection for his personal assets, if he has them, beyond the amount of the insurance policy. And when that does come up, I don't know what insurance defense lawyers do, but I know what they're supposed to do, and that is they tell John Brown, hey, you've got coverage for $20,000, but there's excess liability exposure, and you need to have your personal lawyer giving you some advice as this thing moves into negotiations.
So when we get to the legal strategy, like John Brown, does he get much of a say in the legal strategy for his defense?
No.
Okay.
No. It's the case is controlled by the insurance company. The insurance company is making the decisions. Some of them are more responsive than others. Again, I don't have much experience or knowledge about this, but some of them are better than others as far as keeping the insured informed. But the overwhelming way that it works by far is the insurance company makes the decisions. They tell their lawyer what to do. The lawyer reports to the insurance company, and that's how the decisions get made.
So does John Brown get much say in whether something settles, doesn't settle, and how much money is being offered to the plaintiff? Any of that?
I mean, we're talking about standard collisions involving cars, motorcycles, trucks, and the universal rule is almost always no. John Brown doesn't have a say. The insurance company decides.
So whether it's your fault, somebody else's fault, a crash occurs. What do you think is the overarching message that people need to hear when it comes to those crashes and insurance companies?
If you're the guy getting sued, you just need to realize that the insurance company is out there protecting themselves and not necessarily you. And again, that's why people in that situation sometimes are wise to at least have a personal lawyer that they consult over the thing. But the insurance company's out there for themselves.
I'll leave one final note for our viewers. Don't you think it's strange that an insurance company has to spend billions of dollars annually to inform you that they'll help you when you need them? Until next time, speak truth to power.
Want more biker content? Subscribe to the Biker Lawyers and check out the links in the description.
Brought to you by the Biker Lawyers. Injured? Ride with us.